going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and ask Reverend Bill. He just showed up, but I'm going to ask him to pray us in. He's just so good at it.
Me?
You, Reverend Bill.
Wow, what a surprise. Oh, God. And I mean that seriously. Oh, God.
Yes.
Turn our awareness to that divine power and presence, that one that reveals and shares and expresses and unfolds itself through all of its creation. Everything is that one presence taking its own particular form. That includes each one here. It includes the time that we spend together in this Thought Leader Thursday. It includes all of the words, all the ideas, all the understandings, all the ahas. It's the technology that brings us together. It is that one power and presence that shares itself right now. I'm so grateful for the wonderful way this is coming together. I'm grateful for this time. I'm grateful for Pjae and Michelle and all the good that's unfolding. With gratitude for this good, I speak this word, I let it go, and I know it's so. So it is.
So it is. Thank you so much, Bill. Beautiful. Welcome again, everyone. And I just want to remind you all that we encourage questions and comments. So if you have something that you want to share, if you have questions, you want to clarify some things with myself, the speaker, whomever, be sure to do that. Raise your hand, and Reverend John will let me know that you raise your hand, and we'll call upon you quickly. So thank you all so much. It is just my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Reverend Dr. Michelle Wadley. And if you are a member of ANTN, or even if you are not, and you went to our retreat last year, she just did such a beautiful job of this workshop that she did for us. It was just amazing. And I was so excited to talk with her, to have her come today. She is a pragmatic master teacher, and she unpacks spiritual concepts as they are applicable in everyday life, which is what I love about this spirituality. It's a living spirituality, and we introduce this into our lives and walk our lives every single day with this teaching. She has a strong emphasis on emotional health. She weaves together a talk that speaks to spirituality and metaphysics as the powerhouse formula that they are for living a happy and fulfilled life. She's serious about emotional freedom, spiritual liberation, and transcending the hold of humanity, while never taking herself too seriously. Her topic today, she's coming today to talk to us about forgiveness. And she's a published author of multiple books, but her latest book, Forgiveness, A Path, a Promise, and a Way of Life. There's some information in the chat about how to get her book, about how to contact her if you'd like. So be sure and grab that if you want. Her book is available right now on Amazon. And it was the curriculum of a lifetime of healing work. Many of her readers said they were in tears at the raw and the authentic way in which she shares her story of survival in a dysfunctional family. She believes that her experiences ordained her to write this book. So she's written 3 other books. They're also available on Amazon. Be sure to check those out. She's also published in the November Science of Mind magazine. Check out her article on page 26. Science of Mind magazine, November 2022. And she's been invited back to write a treatment for this year. So you can take a look at that in May, for that May edition. Her wish for the world is that people to learn to love themselves exactly as they are. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Absolutely. So the first question I asked for you, and then you can just take off and do what you want, but I'll just ask a few questions if I can. If you stop and you have finished something, but I'm pretty sure you won't be doing that. I'm sure you have a lot to share with us. But the first question I want to ask you to start is, what got you down this path of forgiveness? Why is this path so important to you?
That can have a couple of different answers, and I want to give you both. One is because as a practitioner and a minister working with clients privately and in workshops and all the different ways in which I work with people, it became very evident that individuals were struggling to let go of their attachment to their story. And what I found was that there was not enough discussion about forgiveness, even in the practitioner training. It just, in my opinion, wasn't emphasized enough. And so when I started incorporating that into my work with individuals, they were able to sever the attachment that they had to their story more readily with a gentle forgiveness practice than with just trying to kind of rip them, like the death grip that some people have on their story. So forgiveness and helping to make sense of it to them was opened the door to them letting go. And the way I made sense is I encouraged them to realize that the lack of letting go and the holding on was always going to keep them in a loop, not in a spiraling evolutionary upward, but the death loop, right? That. So that was the current. But when I was very young, 19, didn't seem really young then, but really young now, my first spiritual teacher had me sitting in a small group with my father, who was an abuser, practicing forgiveness lifetime at the age of 19, a lifetime conversation around forgiveness. And I thought, how courageous of her, never realizing at the time how courageous of me to submit and surrender to that practice. So for me, at the age now, I always like to say this. All of the work that I got early from this beautiful spiritual teacher did not prevent me from messing up the middle of my life, but we all need something to grow on, right? We all do.
Correct.
But the fact is, at the age of 19, I began to break the pattern that was so evident in my other sisters, because we were all abused. But because at the age of 19, I was introduced to this idea. It was from that early age that I got to turn the path of my road and go this way, instead of staying in the story, staying in the pain, and staying in the identity of victim.
Yeah.
So
yes,
that's why. And I've seen it, and I've worked with so many people. And I see what happens with forgiveness.
Yeah. You said you did I'm not sure that your language, you said you did a live forgiveness work. Was your father in the room, or were you?
Yes.
Oh my
Yes,
goodness.
that's what I'm saying. He was in the workshop. He was in the circle with me. And there we were talking about the anger and the abuse live time, with other people in the room.
Wow.
It's the kind of thing that therapists will tell you to avoid and not to do. And, everybody would say, don't do that. Don't bring that out. Don't
know where this is going.
But the fact is, her courage planted in me seeds of courage, which planted in everybody in that room the possibility of not being caught or being victimized by what happened. Someone had to model that. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. I was just kind of following along. But now I see her brilliance, and thank God, because I could have just run from the room and said, oh, I'm out of here. But thank God I didn't. I stayed in the room.
Gotcha.
And very often when we hit those tough spots, we just want to leave the room.
Absolutely.
We want to leave the room. We want to leave the conversation. We want to avoid it. We want to distract ourselves. And thank you, God. Thank you to the God as me that said, stay in the room.
Okay, I'm breathing just hearing you talk about it. I understand. I have to breathe. What do you believe or know for sure that doing this forgiveness work, certainly doing that one at the beginning and just on the rest of your life, how has it changed your life and how you approach life?
Some of the language I use might sound odd to some of you, so you're going to bear with me, okay?
Okay.
Because of the work that I've done, because of the forgiveness, because of what I learned, I want to just say to you, my spiritual teacher was a student of Irvin Seal, and old-time high-level metaphysicians, metaphysical teachers. So that's the foundation. You have to understand that that's the foundation. And I have the luxury of being the victim. Now, what do I mean by that?
Yes, that's an interesting thing to say.
Because I know better, and I know that through forgiveness, I can rise above it.
Okay.
Where my father, unfortunately, went to his deathbed encased in the pain of his actions. But I say that to kind of make you go, what? A little bit, but I had the luxury of being the victim, because then I had the ability then to navigate my way out from under it.
Right.
And so now when and trust me, this happened over layers. This was not a one and done thing.
Yeah.
Okay. But what it did was now I work with a lot of people who have been abused. So I can come to them modeling the possibility. I can come to them with an open and compassionate heart, not from some highfalutin, oh, you have to get over that, but knowing, wow, you don't have to be at the mercy of that. And so I found out I didn't have to be at the mercy of it. And so I bring that into all my conversations, all my teaching, all my counseling, all my from one-on-ones into a group. I know that I'm not at the mercy of what was.
Gotcha.
And wouldn't it be lovely if so many more of us that knew that and can remember that, you know?
Indeed. I was taking a look at unfortunately, I didn't order your book in time to get it, but I was looking at some of the things that was talking about it, and you say that you have several exercises and activities that you share with your clients and with your people to read the book. What are some of the things that you encourage others to do to go down this road of forgiveness?
So, and what I'd like to do, because I'd like you, since you call it Thought Leader Thursday,
yes,
as far as I'm concerned, every individual looking at me, or even if I can't see you, is a leader in some way. You might be the leader of a household, the leader of business, whatever that is. For me, being a metaphysical, spiritual being labels me immediately also with being a leader, which means in the world, I'm responsible for not walking the same path that my parents walked, my sisters walked, or people that are in pain walk all around me. And I used to say to my students, and I will get around to your answer, I'm backing into it.
Yeah.
What I used to say to my students, and they'd be in the classroom and everybody would have this spiritual, lovely metaphysical language at church, and they'd be kind to each other and they'd be happy. And then they'd go home and the proverbial crap would hit the fan, or they get in traffic and suddenly that spiritual being would morph into this other kind of being, or suddenly mad at a neighbor and gossip would ensue. So often, not fully immersed, we can have a double personality.
Yeah.
And I believe it is the requirement of anyone listening to these kind of conversations to be a singular individual modeling the possibility, even if you don't know quite what to say, but to know that life is meant to work, that we're meant to be the presence of love, we're meant to be the presence of compassion, and to take the conversation that we have in here out to the streets at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So wait, now I forgot. So what do I bring? So the book is about forgiveness, but there's a couple of really critical practices, and I've been trying to break them out. Like for right now, the month of February in my community, we are doing a month-long judge-free program.
Nice. Because
one of the things that we often don't realize is that our judgment is an indication to the forgiveness work you're going to have to do.
Okay.
Because when we don't question our judging, we're not paying attention to the way we set someone up to be against us. And so often we're inviting unkind interactions, and then we have to practice forgiveness. But if we practice judgment and we learn to watch our minds and watch how our minds create stories, and then how our minds create stories that we get attached to and we get righteous about. And all of that activity starts with me looking at someone or something or a situation or politics or measuring the news and finding fault and blame and criticism and judging. And all of that is where I get set up to then have all this emotional reaction, where if I'm practicing non-judgment, it doesn't mean I won't judge. We all judge. We all judge all the time. But I won't judge my judging. And I'll be basically learning to understand the activity of my mind.
Got it.
See, we want to learn to watch the activity of our minds. And so in the course, in the book, but in the course that I teach also, is one of the first things I do is I have students start from the day they sign up, practicing non-judgment.
Very good.
Because it teaches us the activity of our minds. The other thing is learning to practice radical self-honesty. Radical. I do private coaching. So when I coach, I'm always giving my clients permission to not be nice. Right? Because especially if you take on a coach that's spiritual in nature, you want to have your best face. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to get their approval. And so I try to squash that as quickly as I can, not because I don't really want them to be nice in the world, but because in order to know what's in the way of me embracing the fullness of my life, I need to know what I'm pondering. And so if I'm working with a client, I'll say to them, just say what is. Just tell me what you're feeling without reservation. Just take off all the judgments and the restrictions, so then we know what we're dealing with. So, and practicing radical self-honesty is about also being able to really to be honest about what we're feeling in any given moment, and to use that as fodder. I just did on our podcast. I have a live podcast that I'm doing now. And on the podcast yesterday, it was about the pearl of the oyster, or one of those. I can't remember the name of it. But we talked about the pearl, that the way that pearl exists is because it was initially an irritant.
Right.
And so if I embrace, lean into, and wrap my loving, compassionate arms around that irritant, which could be anyone here in the way you live inside of me, I'm going to grow and shine instead of running from. So radical self-responsibility. The other thing is, or radical self-honesty, but the other one is, and this is another big one, my spiritual teacher, and I distinguish her from my science of mind teacher. I had a brilliant, lovely science of mind teacher, but I learned different things. And so from my early teacher, what she invited us to look at was embracing, hear me out, folks, 100% responsibility for my life.
Yes.
And that scares the bejesus out of a lot of people.
Out of all of
it's
us.
a scary idea.
For sure.
However, and so the way I break it down, I soften it in the book and in my program because I want people to keep reading, to be honest with you. I don't want them to stop. I don't want them to run into that and go, oh, hell no, I'm out of here, right? So you have choices, or there's different facets the way I present it. We get to take 100% responsibility for what we have created, or we take 100% responsibility for how we react to what's been created around us. That softens it. That I can get a lot of buy-in with that part. But then, of course, we take responsibility for what we create going forward.
Right.
The first one is radical. It's radical. But brilliance doesn't live in the dull. It doesn't. And what people often confuse is responsibility. They confuse it with blame.
Okay.
And we are not talking about blame.
Okay.
Because what I know is that the more responsibility I am willing to embrace, accept, and allow, the more personal power I have
Absolutely.
to get ahead of that formula, the cause and effect formula, right? I can get ahead of it if I accept responsibility and then be willing to talk in responsibility, not blame. But I see a question that came up.
Yes, there's several questions. So I'm going to start with the first question was from Abigail. So Abigail, I'm just going to go ahead and let you ask that question. So guys wrote questions in the chat, but I'll let you ask them. There's 3 questions so far.
Okay.
My question was, when you were in the session with your father, how did you invite him in? How did you get him to be there?
I was wondering that myself. Yeah.
Yeah. How did he,
Well, all right, now I'm going to give you a little personal story, but this is how it worked. I'm the baby of 7. There were 4 girls before me and 2 boys. All of my sisters were abused, and my brother was abused, but in a different way. My mother was a blatant alcoholic. Okay. So it was a perfect dysfunctional family, ripe for growing either messed up people or fulfilled people. And when I was born, my older sisters took my parents to court to try to prevent or try to force them to get help, hoping to not have me succumb to the same thing. Now, it wasn't like it is now. The courts were not like they are now. The system was not like it was now. So basically, the judge said my parents had to get help. Through a friend of a friend, they were guided to work with my spiritual teacher, whose name is Reverend Dr. Rita Rogers. Okay. And so she was self-taught. She could talk metaphysics. She could talk psychology. She was brilliant, beyond brilliant. She could melt your heart by looking at you. So my father was the way. I mean, I was around her when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, absorbing all the concepts. I was never anything other than metaphysician. And so she invited him in because we used to have these regular Friday night workshops. Okay. And I would go with them. We went together. And so I trusted her and I trusted the process. And I was surrounded in a community where I felt so loved and so safe that I could have been naked and still felt that safe. And that one retreat did go skinny dipping with everybody. That was back in the old days, But anyway, the late 70s. So that's really how it happened, Abigail. My spiritual teacher facilitated it, and I trusted her process.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Betty, you had a question?
Yes. My question is, and I'll read some of us feel really good when we get an opportunity to tell that same old hurtful story or traumatized story to somebody new. I mean, because obviously we have told it to the folks we know over and over. But when that new person comes along, that's what we're eager to do. So how do you, as a coach, help the traumatized storyteller to first recognize that she is just re-traumatizing herself by constantly focusing on her hurt instead of forgiveness?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what I bring in a logical, intellectual approach to that. So there's a spiritual approach to this process. There is metaphysical approach. There's and prayer. The whole thing that I do and everything that I do is immersed in prayer. Yeah. I have prayed my way out of pain. That's basically, and that's what I come to my clients with. And my original training also was hypnosis. So I fully understand the value of the subconscious and its impact, how to work with it. I understand how prayer and hypnosis would set off the same bells and whistles in the brain. And so I'm able to bring logic to the fact that the retelling is a reinvesting. It's a subscribing. Every time we talk and we retell the story, if we're not free of it yet, because when you tell the story when you're free, it has a different texture. But if you retell the story, you are resubscribing. And so it is imperative that we look at, is that what I want to have? Do I want the pain and the suffering to continue? And so I will work with the client to help them to understand that their telling is their investing. And I tie that together as closely as I can. Does that help? Yep. Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes.
That's okay. I just saw you shaking your head. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. And the other question is from Lisa Solomon.
Yep.
We'll wait.
Having technical difficulties. So my question really focuses on the people who are in denial. For instance, they are being abused, maybe not physically, but verbally and in action, and they're not really seeing what's happened. And you're coming to Thought Leader Thursday is just perfect timing for me because my husband kind of put his head in the sand about his mother, and I could see that his mother was very abusive to him and really got hurt. And, I come from a belief and really want to hear your thoughts on this, is that the process of forgiveness does not actually begin until you're able to rawly look at the abuse that's happening or what you're lacking. If you don't do that, then you can't even begin the process. And what do you do do you, number one, agree with me? Because a lot of people just say, just look the other way. And number two, yeah, I did everything that I think a regular therapist, I'm not a therapist, but I think a therapist would say, don't have your husband look at it. And I was like, no, that's not the way to go. He has to make his way out of this. And indeed, he was blind because he had no discernment. Sticking your head in the sand, you are going to, and he walked into a really big thing that was really awful. And now he really does understand. But how do you deal with the deniers, or do you not see them because they're not coming to you?
Well, that's actually true. You always attract by right of consciousness, right? Right of consciousness is how our world is created. But what I'm curious, if you can unmute yourself one more second, Lisa. So is the abuse that your husband is experiencing, is it current?
Interestingly enough, it was the last year of his mother's life, and his mother just died. And now he is left with an awareness of all the time she lied to him. And, I'm helping him with the process of forgiveness, but there are two things that have to happen. It wasn't all bad. There were times that David served his mother and they had a closeness. So he's going through two things at once. He's going through the natural grief stage of mourning his mother's death. Mm-hmm. And then that's being kind of, hampered mm-hmm. by also having to do the forgiveness at the same time.
Actually,
so I'm trying to take both of them. And anything you can say to me to help my husband, that would be great.
Yeah, and actually, thank you. And I'm really glad I asked for that clarification, because the truth is, When you're in grief, it is not the time to try to forgive. When you're grieving, grieve. And that could be anything from a short time to a very long time, because the grief process is a different process. Now, can they blend together? Maybe. But the fact remains that I would allow him to just kind of ride out his grief, because otherwise you could just be re-traumatizing him and putting salt on his wounds. Absolutely. So I would tread lightly with that. However, do people come to me who are in denial? They do, because they think they're coming for a highfalutin idea, or they come to me because they want to fix someone else. You know those people, okay? And so, and practicing, and it's one of the last things I had that I didn't get to yet, I do everything I can to bring out the practice of spiritual bypass. It is an epidemic in this movement. It is an absolute epidemic. And I should be able to say to you, and I'm going to be rude for a moment, I should be able to say to you, life sucks and I hate it, without all of you going, whoa, because then I have released the energy that needed to be free, so that then I can.
You're muted. You put to mute.
Yeah, I know. There was some sound going by. I was trying to prevent some sound. Sorry. So then I've released the energy so that then I can get to the healing. What happens is most of us are trying to function on top of dysfunction. We don't even realize the layers upon layers of pain and suffering and stories. And so what happens is because you're a spiritual person, you're supposed to be okay and happy and positive. So why can't you just be positive? Because you have layers upon layers upon layers. And to rush into that without knowing how to do it is irresponsible. So I don't know that I got to, am I answering it yet?
I just had a little something to say, is that I think David's process, he talks about his mother and he said, she's a big fat liar. And so that lack of forgiveness is getting in the way of getting to the grief. So the grief isn't actually coming first.
Then ask him. You ask questions. If you believe that, then what do you want to have happen? Every time, David, every time you say that, what is it you think could happen when you repeat that? Put it back on him. Would you like to find the freedom? Would you like to have it not be in charge of you anymore? Because you don't have to be at the mercy of it. Now, you're his wife. I don't really think you should be putting yourself in that position, to be honest.
Right.
That's kind of, it's a big ask. Yeah. But you could at least prompt him, and you could encourage him to work with somebody who will see him in his wholeness and his beauty, and know that whatever his mother's name was, Sally Joe, that Sally Joe had to be hurt. She had to be wounded. She had to be damaged, because it is not just a cliche. Hurt people hurt people. That's not a cliche. And it's one of the things that I know about my parents, that I know they could not give me what they did not have.
Right.
And the sooner I'm with that, the sooner I can allow for this movement and the flow of love and compassion through me.
Yeah.
So
the other thing I wanted to add to that, because I love everything you're saying, and I hear you, Lisa, this is an interesting thing. And when you are your husband's upset, whoever's upset, and they say, my mother's a big fat liar. Yes, she was. We don't have to deny that. That's true.
Right.
That's the truth. Right. And so he has to say the truth and own that truth, I think, before he can let anything else go. It is true. Once you own that, yeah, it's true. How do we move from here? But at least we have to acknowledge he's telling the truth. That is the truth. The other thing that you talked about, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to give an example to Lisa, since you just sparked something in me. God bless my mother. She was so messed up. God bless her and her.
Learned a lot, did you?
God bless her and her unskilled little self. She, I don't know why she did this. But she said to me over and over and over again as a young girl, oh, your sisters are just jealous. Oh, they're jealous. Oh, they're jealous. And she repeated that to me so much that I bought it. And what happened was it created this division between my sisters and I that was so painful. It wasn't until I was at another workshop with my spiritual teacher and said that out loud to my eldest sister, who was also part of the organization. And I said something to her like, I know I'm always in the way. And she turned to me, she said, how could you be in the way? You're my sister. Oh. And I got that my mother had been lying. And not only did she lie in that way, my sister led me to believe that my next oldest sister was having sex with my boyfriend at a young age. So I hated her and denied her. And it wasn't for years later that I thought to myself, wow, is that even real? So initially, I was impacted in a horrible way, believing that truth. And it took me a couple of decades to question and think, that might not have even been real. So unfortunately, unskilled parenting happens all the time. My first child, I was unskilled. God bless him that he loves me. And I don't think it's through forgiveness. I think he just, needs me in his life. Hopefully one day it is about forgiveness. But what were you going to say, Pjae?
No, that was it. I just wanted to just that about acknowledging that the person is telling the truth, and then the thing that you talked about, because I'm hearing that a lot. The whatever you're saying, the spiritual bypass, and that's what you called it. It feels very judgy to me when I can't speak my truth. I'm pissed off about something, and I have a right to be upset when I'm upset, and to have someone say, oh, you're not holy enough that if you're doing that, it feels judgy, and I can't get to where I need to get to release what I need to release if I feel I'm being judged. And that's, to me, what that spiritual bypass does. That's what I feel. I don't know if
that's a different aspect. I guess when I refer to spiritual bypass, it's when I am denying my pain, denying my suffering, when I decide to distract myself through substances or activities or all the extra things that I can do to distract myself. Or when you say to me, how you doing, Michelle? You're okay? I go, yeah, I'm fine. When I'm not fine, I'm not fine. My voice isn't fine. My essence isn't fine, but I want you to believe I'm fine because I want to believe that I'm fine because I'm supposed to be positive. Damn it.
Okay. So it's spiritual bypass that you're turning in on yourself, that you're doing. That's what got you misunderstood.
Yes. But to deny and I'm glad that you brought that point out, to deny. And I didn't learn this till all my anti-racism work. And what I learned was when someone tells you a story, believe it.
Yes.
At least in that moment, if there's room for the individual that I might be working with to go past it, I'll go past it with them. Right. But initially I have to just accept them at face value.
Right.
Because if they don't trust me, why will they lean into me and let me work with them? Right. They need to feel safe with me. No one's going to feel safe if I'm judging them.
Right.
And I know another question. I didn't read it because my husband's computer is so small.
Is there another question, John? I think we got. Did anybody else have another question? I thought we got to all
something in the chat.
I did. I think I got to all the chats. There were only 3.
No. What if a parent has something to give to one daughter and not the other?
Who asked that question?
Deborah Madison. Let me see where you are. What if the parent?
Deborah, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. And by the way, I just saw the comment from Stephanie, toxic positivity. It's weird that could be true, but it is. So I have run into this so many times where siblings of a same family think that how could that experience, how could you be thinking about mom and dad that way when this was my experience? Because what we often forget in that formula is that you and I entered this planet with already some of our own stuff. We came in with an agenda. And so my agenda might not have been my sister's agenda or my brother's agenda. And then, of course, I happen to have 3 kids, and my first son was interesting. I like to call him interesting. And my second one, after watching my first son, I'm sure he thought to himself, oh, I am not going down that road. And he became like easy. And then my third son was born when I was really embracing spirituality, metaphysics, and really on the road. And he's like a guru, like he's like a little mini guru, because he's just like this great kid. So each child reflects the consciousness that I had at the time that I birthed them. We don't like to hear that, parents.
No, not at all.
I know.
I've got to reflect back on that.
But
okay.
But and I want to. Did you have something else for me?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So I want to say, because I feel like I am casting a vision of what is necessary for leadership. And by no means do I think suddenly we need to go out and start measuring people. Oh, that person's emotionally healthy. Oh, that person's not. So that's ridiculous and, immature. But what I am saying is that the more each of us moves into a process of embracing the fullness of our own being in healthy ways, then we give permission to the people around us and next to us to do the same.
Right.
I don't believe that we could litigate health in politics. I don't believe there are any laws we could pass or any standards we could pass that suddenly is going to change the way this country has set out their standards. I think we have to work at the ground level, at the grassroots level, which is you and I learning to love ourselves unconditionally as we are and as we are not. I mean, I've learned to love myself, but I'm never going to be 5'10" and a blonde with an athletic body. It ain't happening.
Not gonna happen.
So I better learn to love me in this way, because if I'm not, I can't in any way engage others and invite them into that space. And Celeste.
Yes. Yes, you have a question,
Yes.
Celeste?
Well, I don't really have a question. I have a feedback on 2 things. One, it's most important to tell the audience and those who are watching on the recording, we should not be doing counseling unless we are trained as a counselor. As a minister, a practitioner, we teach what we know, which is spiritual mind treatment. If they need counseling, fine, refer them to a counselor. But I was taught counseling is a no. So be that as it may, take it for what it's worth. Now, about changing politicians, we don't want to change anybody. And page 399 of the textbook, we do not change people. We know the truth about them, that they are perfection. If we know that they cannot be changed, guess what? They cannot be changed. But the truth is, it is our thoughts, our tendency of thinking that must accentuate the positive and know the truth about them, that we can have fine representation and supportive government. And this is the truth of my world. And I know this is true. And I see it every day, maybe in little images, and I'm working on bigger images, but knowing the truth is what will set us free. Thank you. I'll get off my podium now.
That's right. Thank you, Celeste. I like what you said earlier, Michelle, about the big. I call it the big R word, because each of us are responsible. So,
Oh, all right.
yeah, I call it the big R word. That's people. People are afraid of that, and that's back to Celeste's thing. Well, no, we're not trying to change anybody. We're responsible for ourselves, and when we show up the way we are, if someone's ready to change, they will use you as an example or whatever. They'll use whatever they need, because what they need is going to flow to them. If at the moment they decide they want something different, that's the power we know we all have. So you're exactly correct. Thank you for that, Celeste. Do you have something else? Because I have a question. If you don't have someplace you want to go with it.
I did, but I forgot it when
Okay.
I was
Well, let me
listening.
ask you
Yeah.
a quick question. Maybe that'll come back to you.
Mhm.
And it harkens back to something you said earlier, but there were so many questions I didn't want to break it up. But you talked about judgment. That was an interesting thing that you said, that judgment being kind of a precursor for you understanding that you need some forgiveness work. The judgment, who needs forgiveness? Yourself? Who are you forgiving? I don't understand
Okay,
that.
yeah, you just reminded me. Let me
good.
grab it before it goes, because here's one thing, and this will make Celeste happy. There is no outside. There is no other. There is no outside. There is no other. There is no outside. There is no other. And the sooner we remember that, and the more we remember that, the more we will do it here and stop altering the world. The appearance of forgiveness is because we're dealing with the human activity. But trust me when I tell you, everything that I do brings us back into the self, because I'm going to forgive I'm even going to forgive myself for suffering.
Yes.
I'll forgive myself for my judging. And in order to have the movement and the expansion that I want, it begins with responsibility. But the responsibility is the way I allow things to live inside my mind, my heart, my being.
Yes.
So if I'm judging you, it lives in me. You're not bothered by my judgment. I mean, you might be if you buy into it, but basically you're not. My judging you causes pain and discomfort in me. It wounds me.
Okay.
I have to carry the weight of that. I have to carry the weight of all the judgments and all my opinions and all my righteousness. And I can't find freedom when I'm weighted down with all of that. Yes. So the work for me as metaphysicians is and it will sound like you're working with outside people. And even in the course and in the book, we start looking outside. Why? Because that's the low-hanging fruit. But that's to build the muscle. We build the muscle, and then we cultivate the compassion. We cultivate our understanding. We cultivate, we cultivate greater love, one step at a time. And if I'm practicing, and like I said earlier, we're all going to judge anyway. But if I cease judging my judging, and I look and I see when I'm judging, I go, oh, look at that. I really think I know better. I really think I'm superior. Oh, look at me. Wow. And instead of even making me wrong, I find some amusement and I go, who do you think you are, Michelle? And I gently, gently back up and back away from my righteousness, which is blinding. Yeah. It's blinding. Excellent. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Does anybody else have a question about that or a thought about that?
Catherine, did you have your hand up? No.
But Mitch does. Mitch has his hand up.
Hello, beloved Mitch. I was thinking about you.
Hello, good to see you. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Sure.
I had a question. I get the judgment piece, and I especially get we get snap judgments, that we make quickly that aren't always accurate. But I guess I'm more curious about the difference between, if there's a difference between judgment and discernment, because sometimes, people in their unhealed parts do show up, and you have to make a decision about where they should be in your life relative to you and, self-honoring and those types of things.
Yeah. And thank you for Good to see you, darling, and thank you for the question. And one is an outgrowth of the other, you know, and I use the word judgment because it has a little bit more impact, right? Because most of us are very unconscious about the activity of our mind. We're just unconscious. We're unconscious about how much we judge, how often we judge. And if you, and at the point where maybe it softens into discernment, well, that's where it is good to trust your intuition and not be in relationship with somebody that intuitively sends off all the bells and whistles. Now you can say to me, well, aren't you judging that person? If I'm doing my work and I'm in touch with the one as me, I'm going to trust it. Walk down that road, not walk down that road, be in relationship, not be in relationship, but I'm going to trust it. So discerning and judging are again, they're qualities of ways of being that as we begin, again, we all judge all the time. So I watch my mind, but what I find, and, you know, I've heard people say, oh, we will always judge. We will never, you know, we're never not going to judge. But being judgmental and judging are different. Like being a victim and being victimized are different, right? And so what I've learned is that more quickly, I see the impulse come up. I feel it rearing its head, you know, from the back of me where I'm about to slam an opinion on someone. And I look and I go, do I want to live with that? So I'm constantly paying attention, whether it's discerning or judging, I'm paying attention because I can't live outside myself. I can't live outside of my actions. I can't live outside of my behaviors and the way I engage the world. And a lot of people and leaders specifically think they can act one way, but hide the what's going on in the underbelly. We can't.
Yes.
It shows up somewhere. Everything is about cause and effect. It always shows up. It is always measured upon us in some way. And I want to be really clear, by no means, I would never want anything that I do, any book that I write, any course that I teach to be about forgiveness, to be translated as we're supposed to be a doormat.
Yeah, right.
No.
Right. Thank you.
No. And, you know, one teacher I had say, oh, you should stay in the relationship and work it out, or you're going to carry your problems with you. Not if you're being abused. Not if you're being disrespected. Get the hell out and just work on it later.
Right.
So self-care is critical in the middle of all of this.
And it's not always you that needs the work. And, you know, you're in a relationship. It's not, you don't have, why do you take the blame for necessarily having the work? You've done the work. You can't get someone else. As someone just said, you can't do the work for somebody else. They have work to do. That's a discernment. That's not a judgment. It's clear. They have work to do and they're not willing to do it. So why do you need to stay there? But there's another question because we got to go in a few moments and I don't want to run out of time. And I do want to get Lisa Alman, if that's okay with you.
By the way, I do want to point out that in the chat, I put the material for my website. I don't even know if I think I put my email address in there. My Planned Happiness Institute. So that's and we are currently running a program for Lent for a modern, you know, I wrote a book called 40 Days of Freedom, a Lenten Practice for the Modern Mind. If you want to participate, you can go on the website and sign up for all of that. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for this. This has been absolutely amazing, eye-opening. I love it when I hear something I've heard many times before, but just in a different way, because like you said, there's always layers to things. And so to hear something, I mean, I'm glad I was on mute because a lot of things you said I'm writing down, and I'm like, oh, shit, that is like, oh my God, you know? So really, really thank you for this. And for everybody who is on here, who is actually, you know, practicing minister or licensed teacher, which I'm not, I'm always so appreciative of hearing people like you said, that are not doing the spiritual bypassing, that are actually saying, you know, this is how I work on myself to show up, to lead people and whatever their things are. I heard Michael Gott said one time, a question was about that. How do you do your spiritual work as a spiritual leader, you know, like a minister? And he said, you have to be committed to growing up in public. And so I appreciate the way that all of you are expressing your questions and the things that you're sharing, is that you're showing up as you and saying, hey, just because I'm here, you know, people put you up here, that I have work to do too. And I'm not up here, by the way. I'm saying,
Right.
you know, so I just wanted to tell you that, give you that feedback. This has been absolutely phenomenal.
Good.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And Lisa, by the way, is going to be our guest speaker in April.
April. There is one thing, and I don't have time to even go into it much, but if you are a metaphysician, if you are a practitioner or a minister, if you have studied Thomas Troward, you are perfectly positioned to understand the use of the subconscious and why it's critical to speak to and pray from that level. Because if we do not really consider the subconscious, because a lot of the pain that we carry, we don't see it. We don't see it because it's been hovering. Now, it does not mean you can't get to it. Prayer can get to anything. It can seep into all those places. But some of the reasons why we repeat this forgiveness and why the pain keeps recycling through us is because we didn't see where it is. And it's living in a dark cave of the subconscious. But if you have studied, you should know how to uproot it. So please consider that. And if you want more information about that, definitely reach out to me, because it's the missing piece. I used to use radical forgiveness all the time with all my classes. That was the book I referred to till I wrote my own. But he didn't engage that. And he didn't engage the spiritual aspect as much as I would have liked, or prayer. And so that's why, for me, this book is written for people like us who understand all those layers. So I just
thank you so much. Thank you very much. Celeste, I know you want to say something. Can you be quick? Because we've got like 2 minutes and I have a couple of more things to say. So
yes, I can be very quick. I wanted to share a quote from the late Dr. J. Scott Neal for people that were having problems with forgiveness and wanting to tell their victim stories over and over. And he would say to them, do you want to be justified or do you want to be healed?
Which is very cold.
Yes.
Yes.
And a lot of
I would never say that or repeat that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But sometimes people need to say, you know, I really want to be healed.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Michelle. I feel like I have been in service today. Seriously, really good. Thank you all. Yes. Thank you. A couple of things I want to remind you. Next month in March, our speaker is going to be Robert Brzezinski, and our wonderful Reverend Marcioni is going to be hosting us with that. So thank you so much for that. We do have an upcoming ANTN virtual town hall on Friday, March the 10th. From 9 to noon PST, Pacific time, right? 9 to noon Pacific time, coming up March the 10th, which is a Friday. So do be involved in that. We have Gather and Gab, hosted by Gabe Beauregard. You see her right there. Second Sundays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So please join us for that. Anton's annual retreat this year is October the 2nd through the 6th at Unity Village. And some good news, we have a second Anton book coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. That information is coming up for how you can get involved in that. Thank you all so much. John, do you have anything else to say? Well, we can get on out of here. We got one more minute.
No, we're good. Thank you. You hit the reminders.
Right. Thank you so much.
You all.
Steve, what you got for us, Steve?
There we go.
Woo! There's our breakfast.
I was hoping you'd get around to me because I didn't want to eat all of this.
It's delicious and such a variety. Thank you all so much. I hope to see you next month. And I appreciate you all so much for being here. Thank you. Have a great day. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.